The excitement from watching the training session wore away, and the worrisome thoughts from earlier in the day returned after leaving the expeditionary office. Knowing that he should be able to get his answers upon reaching Momon's guest manor, Ainz distracted himself by striking up a conversation with Nobril. "So Nobby," he asked, "what did you think about all that?" "Mayor Summer is working very hard," she smiled fondly. "The tomb he created is wonderful as well." "I meant the adventurers, Nobby." Nobril narrowed her eyes and frowned. "They're still pitiful insects," she said. "I believe they've become much better compared to the ones from back then. It is only through Ainz Ulgaun Summer's benevolence that they've been able to make any improvement," she sniffed. "They would still be wallowing in their ignorance otherwise." "Ma, that's just how it is, isn't it?" he told her. "The Sorceress Kingdom will bring change for all, becoming the ideal nation where all its citizens may live in peace and pursue their happiness. Adventurers should be adventuring, not working as disposable bounty hunters." "Yes, Momon Sa-en." They crossed the short distance to the guest manor and paused at the door. It would be decidedly odd if Momon had to wait to be let into his own home, so Ainz entered and made his way upstairs to the solar. "Pandora's actor," Ainz said as he opened the door to the room, "there are a few answers that I require from." His voice died in his throat as he walked in on the very same woman that they had encountered in the main plaza. She turned and offered him a brilliant smile. "Ah, my lord father," she spread her skirts out in a curtsy, "did you enjoy your time in the city?" "Lord father? Ah, that's it, this is Pandora's actor in." Ainz's thoughts froze and he ground to a halt in the doorway. His mind slowly unthawed as he recalled the happenings of the past few hours. More involved with the citizens, new relationships. What did that woman say? Karma fled from branch to branch, hold him tightly. Dash. As the pieces fell into place, Ainz's mouth fell open in horror, emotional suppression firing several times but unable to quell the storm raging within. The familiar behavior of the woman. Nobril's reaction. He had been fretting over Aura and Mare's education on these topics, but it appeared that the most problematic one of them all was right in front of him. "You." His voice filled the room as he strode forward. Pandora's actor, in the form of the woman, backed away in alarm until his back bumped into the wall. Momon's gauntleted hand slammed into the wooden surface beside the doppelganger's head, and wisps of long, chestnut hair fluttered after the impact. "Ah!" Kabeden came the woman's faint voice, a rosy flush appeared over high cheekbones. St. Ainz's illusory eyebrow twitched as he registered the shy words. He hesitantly turned his head to glance behind him, finding Nobril staring at them with an expressionless face. Then her lip twitched. This was definitely bad. He stepped back before anyone else could accidentally stumble upon the sight. Stealing another glance at the woman's form, he decided that if Pandora's actor had not addressed him so, he would have believed it was actually her. Something didn't feel quite right, though. "Pandora's actor," he attempted to keep his voice calm. "What are you doing? What is your relationship with this woman?" "Our relationship? I suppose we see each other from time to time. We've known one another for a few months now." "A few months? That's basically since I had him take over as Momon. More than enough time to, wait, does that mean I'm going to be a grandfather soon? Damn you. I haven't even." Ainz Summer? The fact that Pandora's actor was in the form of the woman made things even more confusing. He gave himself a shake. Even if he was too late, he should still give him a good talking to. Women would often proposition him during his days as Momon. Considering the warm and relaxed aura of this woman in his presence, there was a strong possibility that that matter was, Pandora's actor would need to take responsibility, and stop being such a philanderer. A philanderer, that meant. He looked over at Nobril. "That's what it meant, right?" "I'm so sorry, Nishikin Rai-san. Because I didn't teach my son properly, your daughter has." "Ainz Summer?" This time, it was Nobril's voice, and Ainz looked to his right. Her face was painted with concern as she looked up at him. "Ah, so this is the face of my daughter-in-law, No, wait. This can't be right, or can it? It's true that they're both doppelgangers, but Nobril doesn't really like him, right? Wait, Pandora's actor said she was perfect for the role of Nobby. Maybe she's been acting so perfectly that only Pandora's actor can tell? No, No 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 no. Narbril is just a Narbril. Or. AHHH. What do I do? Did something happen? Pandora's actor asked Narbril as Ainz wrestled with his inner turmoil. We came across that woodlouse near the cathedral. Near the end of the conversation, she said, something. The battle maid's voice faltered and fell off. Something? Pandora's actor tilted his head. That's right. Ainz looked back towards him and interjected, explain. What am I explaining, Ainz Summer? That voice, no, that woman. He pointed at Pandora's actor. Why did she approach us and say that? Who is she? I still have no idea what she said, Ainz Summer. No, he replied. Did she thank you for something? Yes, exactly. Then it must be that. That. Indeed. It was not strenuous, by our measures, but it was quite eye-opening in various ways, he chortled in the woman's voice. As for who she is a noble we encountered shortly after the handover of Erantal. A noble? Like adventurers, he discovered that the nobles of this world led, for the most part, rather mundane and decidedly non-fantastical lives, contrary to how they were often depicted in the entertainment of his own world. He had studied Emperor Jurkhanov while performing research on how to conduct himself as a sovereign, and it seemed that only the emperor and his court somewhat matched their fictional counterparts, mostly when acting in an official setting. If anything, running a nation more resembled running a company rather than leading through acts of high-handed willfulness or spectacular charisma. Even the annexation of Erantal did not have the hallmarks of a fantasy conquest. A formal battle had been fought and won, and what had followed was nearly a month of paperwork. Rather than a conquest, it felt like a business acquisition. Once the paperwork was signed, the territory, its assets and its staff simply saw a transfer of ownership. Many had fled, which was to be expected given the circumstances as they saw them, but many had also stayed. If one were to continue with the analogy, the nobles who assisted in administering large portions of Ramposa's former domain were essentially middle managers who came along with the acquisition. As he had ordered the adoption of Riestai's law in the Sorceress Kingdom, the roles of these managers did not change, they simply went from working for Company A to Company B. Which was perfectly fine with him. Or rather, he didn't want to think about rebuilding everything from scratch. Like any company, these employees would be of varying quality but, reportedly, the dismal state of Riestai's was mostly due to the lack of resources available to enforce law and policy, or more compelling options being presented. As he planned on creating a utopia for all which was supported by the might of Nazarick, any vestigial problems that they inherited would quickly melt away, or so he hoped. Come to think of it, he felt that there was something related in some past report. That's right, Pandora's actor said. The domestic reports almost never describe personal appearance, so it's understandable that you might not recognize this individual on sight. She was one of the first to embrace many of the ideas that you introduced to the new realm: undead labor, lich administrators, death series security, as well several interesting innovations stemming from her unique perspective. Her ability to analyze and adapt could be said to be one of her strongest traits. The data we've collected from her activities has helped to improve and refine our systems for use elsewhere in the realm. She, along with her associates, even resolved a legal issue inherited from Riestai's to even Demiurge's satisfaction. Is that so? Then what is this person up to now? Shiltir has enlisted her assistance in various things, including with the new aerial transportation network. Baroness Saradnik is also actively participating in the new Adventurer Guild. Shiltir did? Adventurer? To be honest, she didn't have the look of one. That in itself is a most intriguing point. Pandora's actor detached himself from the wall and started pacing about. Demiurge has conducted tens of thousands of studies regarding the physiology of the natives of this world and has proposed several theories that attempt to reconcile Yggdrasil's systems with its own. We've taken this foundation and used it in the Adventurer Guild to further build our understanding. Ainz mulled over the statement. Their woefully inadequate knowledge revolving around the mechanics of this world, along with the inability to bring up status screens and other elements associated with Yggdrasil, served as a lofty barrier to their development of the citizens. Not only could they not guide adventurers properly in their class growth, but they also could not ensure that their national industries were optimized by using civilians with ideal production builds. Using the Adventurer Guild, which they enjoyed comprehensive oversight over, as an avenue of research was an inspired notion. "I presume that this is the reason you've taken this appearance," he said. "That's precisely correct," the doppelganger replied. You've recently encountered her, this is just the likeness, no?" Ainz returned to his normal equipment, dispelled his moment illusion, and examined Pandora's actor. To be honest, while he could distinguish between humans better than he could, say, goblins, he was not exactly confident in assessing individuals that he had only seen in passing. "Her breasts are nowhere near that large," Noble's lip curled. "That's, they just feel better this way, right, Ainz Summer?" Ainz's emotional suppression triggered once again. "Why are you dragging me into this, you walking cringe generator?" Noble clicked her tongue sharply. Both Ainz and Pandora's actor flinched. If he was being perfectly honest with himself, he would be forced to agree. Those were his own tastes, after all. He did not recall putting anything of the sort in his NPC's settings, though it appeared that his black past was not the only thing Pandora's actor had inherited. He dreaded what else could possibly manifest if this was the case. Wait, did that mean he himself had a penchant for cross-dressing, too? The recent outfits that had been selected for him by the homunculus maids were quite. "If replicating this individual for research purposes is the goal," Ainz said quickly, "then I believe you should be as authentic as possible." "Your word is my will, Ainz Summer," Pandora's actor replied sharply, and Ainz could not help but watch sadly as the manifestation of hopes and dreams before him shrunk away. "Where was I? Yes, physical appearance. The subject you see before you is a most compelling case of how experience and levels are gained in this world. While I mentioned that she was participating as a part of the Adventurer Guild, she was barely active in their training program until recently. When we first encountered this young noblewoman, she had unknowingly inherited her family's territory and was barely an adult, level 1, if you will. This is what I surmised, based on my measurements of her physical performance relative to other humans of various vocations that we had encountered previously. Between that starting point and when she was able to commit more time to the Adventurer Guild, she qualified to take the gold rank test." Ainz cradled his chin in thought after taking a seat on the plush couch nearby. If he recalled the equivalencies correctly, this meant that she had gained somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 levels in the time since the annexation of Erantal. "I take it that, like in Yggdrasil, low levels are not difficult to obtain?" "This is a matter of some debate," Pandora's actor replied, "but at least with the Adventurer Guild this seems to be the case. Even the copper plates we started out with are already gold now, or nearing it, due to the regular training Mare has put them through. How they advance from this point is yet to be seen. Anyways, this individual did not partake of the regular training, yet advanced as fast as her adventurer peers. So she discovered an alternative method of leveling, one that rivaled what we could provide to the Adventurer Guild?" That sounded like bad news. The training area was one of the major draws of the Sorceress Kingdom's Adventurer Guild. If there was a way to match its benefits through other means. Initially, Pandora's actor said, we could only speculate that she gained her levels undergoing challenges which provided a sum of experience equivalent to what could be gained in the training area. After some investigation after being made aware of it, however, it seems that there is indeed a precedent. Actually, the vast majority of experience gains in this world do not occur from killing monsters, it is mostly from performing tasks relevant to one's vocation. This may be a gross oversimplification, but one could swing a sword 10,000 times and gain fighter experience by doing so. I see. So she performed relevant tasks and gained levels through them. Precisely, and in using those alternate means, she did not gain the usual physique of a combatant. As long as one possesses the appropriate levels, one will also gain the stats, abilities and traits associated with those levels. A perfectly harmless-looking individual can actually be a dangerously powerful one in reality. I suppose that is something we should already know, as many of the NPCs have appearances which belie their actual capabilities. So in taking the form of our adventurers, you can confirm various observations that have been made. That seems straightforward enough, Ainz nodded. Then, what have you found out about this woman? This woman, that is, Ludmilla Zaradnik, is quite the puzzle, actually. The rest of the adventurers were easier to figure out, as adventurer roles tend to share much in common with Yggdrasil ones. I've spent a lot of my free time with her analysis, actually. Ho, do tell. A spear appeared in Pandora's actor's hand, and the figure of the human woman flowed through several smooth maneuvers across the polished stone floor. Though she is a noble, which we understand to be something like a civilian class that did not exist in Yggdrasil, she currently exhibits the rough baseline performance of a level 10 fighter. She also refers to herself as a ranger rather than a fighter, and has repeatedly demonstrated the skill set of a ranger. Well, both ranger and fighter have similar basic capability in melee at low levels, Ines noted. It isn't until they start branching out into specialized class builds that any sort of significant divergence occurs. The notion that she is a noble is curious, however. As you've mentioned, they're supposed to be weak non-combatants. Save for a handful of cases, yes. Pandora's actor propped the spear up in one hand. It wasn't until I did some digging into the older intelligence reports that I made any sense out of it. The Imperial Army actually has many nobles that pursue martial service, becoming captains and generals in their legions. 2 of the surviving Imperial Knights are from these ranks of the martial nobility, both reportedly quite powerful by the standards of the local humans. My running hypothesis is that Baroness Saradnik, and those nobles like her, possess a prestige class, except rather than the prerequisite for that class being fulfilled by contributions from base classes, it comes from her lineage and cultural tradition. In essence, she has access to an advanced class from level 1. That's dirty. If this was Yggdrasil, everyone would be screaming Imba. Well, no, even if it had a good suite of skills and abilities, the people around here usually don't have the levels to bring out the full power of those classes. Actually, she might. Under us, she might have the chance for a good build. Ines set aside his thoughts on build mechanics and started weighing out the pros and cons. On one hand, it might be dangerous if she were to grow powerful. On the other hand, she was being monitored closely and could potentially yield knowledge in several of the more practical fields of study in this world that they were still woefully ignorant of. For now, it should probably be all right. Then what of her capabilities? Ines asked. What benefits are gained from having this class? Well, therein lies the problem with this method of analysis. Pandora's actor scratched his head. While I can copy the appearance and physical properties of the adventurer being studied, I only seem to be able to perform actions that are available in Yggdrasil. Actually, since there have been some adjustments, allow me to try again. Hold still for one moment please, this won't hurt. Ines's stomach sank as Pandora's actor went through a series of movements that looked suspiciously like that of a Sentai hero before framing his eyes between his hands and crying out. Justice Radar Ines froze in his seat, jaw dropping open as he gripped the armrests of his seat. He waited for his emotional suppression to catch up. Won't hurt, my ass. It's so embarrassing that it hurts. What sort of penalty game is this? It's as I thought, Pandora's actor said, no effect. Nobe-chan, that sneer of yours hurts. What the hell was that? Ines unfroze and nearly shouted, is that an actual ability of hers? Does she actually scream that when she uses it? I've only read about it in reports, Ines Summer, he replied. It doesn't mention anything of the sort, but I figured it should have a suitable activation phrase. It's some sort of tracking ability that detects criminals or something along those lines. Something like that exists? Ines said, perhaps you should have asked her to demonstrate how it works before attempting it yourself. Unfortunately, she lost the class level associated with this ability and hasn't been able to re-obtain it through adventurer training. As such, I believe it has something to do with her judicial duties. Ines winced. That was the worst kind of death when you were leveling, ones that robbed you of new abilities shortly after you gained them. It was apparently far worse in this world since one couldn't just select what levels they were taking by choosing it from a game UI. So she has to run around catching criminals to get it back? Ines asked. Touch me would have a field day with that. Wait, she lost levels? From how you've been promoting this individual, she sounded like she was doing well for herself. She died twice in as many days. It's quite the mystery. It certainly shows that the quality of personnel can vary so widely even when they should all be the same strength. Dying twice, back to back in this word, that seems like it would be rather discouraging. Not at all, Pandora's actor chuckled. She only comes back with varying degrees of annoyance. As I mentioned, adaptability is one of her greatest strengths. Even death no longer seems to have any hold on her, now that she knows that resurrections are available. She dies, gets up, analyzes what went wrong and throws herself back into training. A voluntary test subject that energetically applies herself into whatever task is at hand, and she always comes back, even when faced with frustrating setbacks. It sounds like you've identified a most useful individual, Ainz said. How are the costs for these experiments being handled? I promised my full support to the Adventurer Guild, but, even so, they've been allocated a limited budget in order to promote efficient expenditures. Albedo frowns, Ainz sweats. I see. I suppose a provisional budget for the purposes of collecting test data should be established. You may present it to Albedo when you determine what is appropriate. Your generosity is most appreciated, Ainz, though hunting down criminals, do you believe this would be effective in regaining her missing levels in this mysterious class? You mentioned that she resolved a legal issue in the West, did you not? If nothing else has worked so far, and she's done nothing else of note, then it should be the case. Something like a class quest. His voice trailed off as he considered what he had just said. As if adventurers would have all sorts of exotic classes by completing job requests if that was the case. We don't even have NPCs that hand out quests in the first place. I shall begin making the suitable arrangements, Pandora's actor said. There is just the place for this as, yes, everything fits together so well. Eh? The form of the woman before him took on an inspired expression. He hoped that he wouldn't enter into those grand gesticulations that he was prone to. Though the major issues have been resolved to the west, Pandora's actor continued, Count Vulcanheim is still sorting out matters in his reorganized domain. There appears to be nothing substantial, but there should at least be a few lingering elements left over from Ria's ties to root out. Sasuga Ainz, I cannot hope to compare with your mastery over the grand stage that is the Sorcerer's Kingdom. To think that you've plotted out contingencies to this degree. Vulcanheim? The name sounded like it should be familiar. Well, no matter. More importantly, he hoped he wasn't about to send out one of the administrators of the realm on some fool's errand. Ainz nodded sagely. I hope it does not need to be stated that this world has many distinct differences from our own, so labeling such things as class quests may not be entirely accurate. Of that, I am painfully aware, Pandora's actor smiled ruefully. Our efforts to qualify and categorize this world's class progression systems with the Adventurer Guild often hit rough patches, though not as confounding as this particular one. With your definitive inference, however, we are one step closer to developing a way to direct our adventurers onto the paths desired. Good. If your work can be developed into a practical theory, we will be able to apply it to the entire Sorcerer's Kingdom. I am especially keen on seeing how this knowledge can be applied to the growth of our new runesmiths. While I can't say that I can send tradesmen through the adventurer training area, I will begin collecting information and see if I can find any correlations. The brow of the woman furrowed and she seemed to enter deep into thought, muttering to herself. Runesmiths, the world's systems, unable to copy, I see. The expression of the woman brightened, eyes shining as she cast her gaze over him. You are far too kind, Ainz, to think that you would so gently guide me to the cause of her puzzling deaths. Truly, I am blessed to have such a father. The urge to squirm in his seat nearly overwhelmed him. Ainz thought he did well ad-libbing the mystery of the missing ability, but now he had seemingly solved another unfathomable problem. His mind worked as he tried to figure out a way to step around it. Well, I'm sure it was simply a matter of time before you figured it out as well, he told Pandora's actor. Besides, that particular problem has outsized costs associated with it. You are, of course, correct, Ainz, Pandora's actor nodded. Not only with the cost of resurrections, but we very nearly made fools out of ourselves as well. I will begin planning out the required changes. As for the other problem, I believe that Nabril would be suited to observe Baroness Zaradnik as she performs her tasks. We certainly can't take any of the Guardians away from their duties. They are acquainted with one another, so things should run within acceptable parameters. Nabril? Are you sure? Or so he wanted to say. Glancing over at Nabril, he decided that he shouldn't show any disapproval after he had so recently praised her for her work as Nobe. She didn't seem to react so vehemently to this individual, either. Perhaps some progress could be made with the way she interacted with outsiders by going along with the plan. So long as it doesn't interfere with your ongoing work together as darkness. He told them, then turned to Nobril. Nobby, I look forward to some positive results. Ha. Nobril responded with a sharp affirmative, and Ainz frowned inwardly. He hoped his message got through to her. Then again, she never left swathes of electrocuted humans in her wake when left to her own devices, so maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Umu, excellent work, Pandora's actor. You may convey my satisfaction to all of the others involved in your activities. Ainz rose from his seat, and Pandora's actor waited on him, folding the woman's hands over her abdomen. Does he really have to stay in that form? He's already come to his conclusions, hasn't he? I hope he's not going to do anything weird after I leave. Pandora's actor. Ha, the figure of the woman stood at attention. I consider you an adult, so I will try and keep my nose out of your personal matters, but you are to always conduct yourself as a gentleman, and take responsibility for your actions. Hejinmil, as it turned out, could actually fly. Ilishnish could only watch in horrified fascination as her brother crawled out of the city through the main access shaft. She wondered if he would get stuck along the way, but he didn't, to her slight disappointment. Sometime later, they emerged on the surface and crawled up onto a wall of the city's trading outpost. Below, a steep valley stretched on, its depths shrouded by icy clouds and blowing snow. Hejinmil pushed off of the wall and wobbled away ponderously into the sky. Ilishnish looked around cautiously one last time for potential ambushes along the flight path before taking wing herself. It was a matter of seconds before she caught up with her brother. Hejinmil struggled mightily, working just as hard to stay aloft as he did accelerating forward. It took nearly 10 minutes until he finally picked up enough speed for his wings to keep himself level with the continued effort. Still, he was absurdly slow, flying at only a third of what Ilishnish considered a leisurely pace. She sighed and pulled ahead of him, allowing him to pick up a bit more speed by following in her slipstream. It took nearly 2 hours to finally rise above the peaks to relative safety. Ilishnish turned her head back to speak to Hejinmil. In which direction are we going? She asked. Hejinmil's only reply for a long while was his labored breathing before he puffed out a breathless response. South. He huffed, past foothills, 3 concentric circles in the lowlands. After hearing her brother's directions, Ilishnish banked southwards and ascended a few thousand additional meters before setting into a relaxed glide. From her altitude, she had a view of the region's landscape to the east and the west. They were still too far north to spot anything beyond the spine of icy peaks to the south. Ilishnish had ranged the length and breadth of the Azalizia Mountains and out into the seas of the north, but she had little experience beyond. Once, she had ventured past the foothills on the eastern slopes but was immediately met with opposition. Shortly after she crossed over the low-lying forests, a half-dozen hippogriffs with small figures riding them appeared from below to ascend in her direction. She didn't want to know what would happen if they somehow managed to get close, so she returned to the mountains. Plagued by doubts over how safe it was to travel, she had not tried to leave again even after several decades had passed. Home was dangerous enough as it was, beyond was possibly far worse. It took them over 2 days to reach the beginning of the southern foothills due to Hejinmil's sluggish pace, but, even with the long hours to settle her nerves as they glided safely high over the mountain peaks, her last memory of attempting to explore the lowlands remained at the forefront of her mind. The formation of hippogriffs from back then certainly seemed aggressive. The riders, too, she sensed were each equipped with a small panoply of magic items. What if it happened again? She had very little confidence against so many unknown assailants. Even as she scanned the terrain below with the worrying thoughts in mind, 6 dark figures appeared from the canopy below and to the east. They ascended directly towards Ilishnish and her brother. It only took a moment to register their features. They were about half again as tall as Quagua, but much thinner. Dressed in black robes and holding gnarled wooden staves, crimson points of light stared intensely in their direction from skulls wrapped in desiccated flesh. Undead. Though many undead were capable of flight, they had the look of corporeal magic casters. They appeared too strong to be skeleton mages, so, elder liches? Once in a while, a skeleton mage or an elder lich manifested in the Azalisia Mountains, in the valleys and passes that hosted the timeless conflicts and savage struggles between the numerous species making the range their home. They didn't survive for long, however, becoming target practice for frost giants. Individually, she sensed that they were weaker than her, but she still couldn't beat 6 of them at once. Sister? Heginwald's surprised voice came from below. Ilishnish looked down and realized that, while she was assessing the situation, she had unconsciously increased her altitude to gain time to think. Heginwald rapidly fell behind as he no longer had the benefit of being in her slipstream, and he steadily dipped lower and lower in an increasingly futile effort to maintain his speed. It occurred to her that she could simply use her brother, so she watched as he fell further and further behind. Once the elder liches caught up with him, she would know whether they intended to collect them for experiments or materials. It took about another hour for the elder liches to reach Heginwald's altitude and surround him, with Ilishnish weaving high above as she awaited his fate. Due to the time it took for them to do so, she understood that they were limited to flight magic, and they were utterly incapable of actually catching her, should she choose to escape. She didn't know why, but the flight spells commonly used by magic casters conferred a set speed to whomever they enchanted, and many creatures capable of natural flight were far faster than what a magic caster using the spell could achieve. She estimated that she could fly many times faster than the elder liches that were pursuing them, so she relaxed and continued to glide well out of spell range. Ilishnish watched as Heginwald looked around himself nervously, but he did not seem to be preparing to fight. His mouth moved as he said something she was too far to hear, and the formation of undead mages split away and descended back towards where they had appeared. She tucked in her wings and dove towards her brother, leveling out behind him and slowing herself before assuming her position in front again. "What was that all about?" she asked. "It was a border patrol," he answered. "They came up to see what our business was." "Why didn't you tell me before I flew off?" "I didn't notice them." "Actually," he laughed nervously. "They gave me quite the scare when they suddenly appeared around me. I suppose that's why you left me behind." "Yes," she replied. "I figured that I would find out whether they were hostile or not by watching what happened after they caught up with you." "Oh. Well, that makes sense. Shutting yourself in for a century has dulled your instincts, brother. I hope that you now know the meaning behind Father's words." Their father always said the same thing to Heginwald, who had shut himself away with his tomes and parchments to learn about the world. No matter how much they argued through the door, it would always end with the same advice: if you want to acquire knowledge, leave this place and travel the world. A downcast expression fell over Heginwald's form, a tone of regret filled his voice. "I do now." "Yes," her brother said. "I always thought he was just unreasonably threatening me with something I dreaded, but I guess he really did care. I learn things 1,000 times faster when I experience them directly. I guess that's just how we are, and he wanted me to understand that." "Well, it's a good thing that you do. I just wish I could apologize, to admit that he was right, but now, he's gone." "Apologize?" Ilishnish sneered. "Don't tell me that you have even more useless thoughts bouncing around in that bouncy head of yours. Don't waste your energy wishing for pointless things. No one wants your apologies. You should know as well as I what Mother and Father want." I'm not sure if you should be saying anything along those lines out in the open, sister. Becoming stronger is one thing, but I'm pretty sure we'll never become so strong that any of us can claim dominion now." It seemed like prudent advice, at least until she could figure out the difference in strength between herself and this new Dragon Lord. There was no point in rushing anyways. If Olisar Dark had been slain so easily, she thought it would take at least a millennium to even consider such ideas. Until then, she could explore and learn to her heart's content. To her left, a circular structure on the ground drew her attention. It wasn't 3 circles, though. "What's that?" "That?" Heginwald followed her gaze. "Oh, that. It's the lair of our new ruler. You'll probably see it up close sooner or later." Ilishnish frowned. If a Dragon Lord had made his lair this close by, how did they not know about him? Distant lands aside, they should have sensed that the territory of another dragon was right next to their own. A cluster of structures passed below them, arrayed in circuits around a central group of buildings. "How about all this below us?" "That's Carney," Heginwald replied, "a human settlement." "Well, They said that, but it seems to be mostly goblins and a handful of other demi-humans. Are they slaves? It doesn't seem like it from up here. Slavery is against the law in this nation, anyways. The law? Ilishnish said as she continued to observe the goings-on below. You mean those things like rules? Yes, dear sister. Their father had rules as well. Rules for the dragons, rules for the Quagga. Ilishnish wondered what sort of rules were applied to dragons in this new place. Slaves were useful for gathering treasure and dealing with menial odds and ends beneath the notice of their masters. Surely it was the lesser beings who were not allowed slaves, to keep them from becoming full of themselves and gaining undeserved wealth. Ahead of them, she saw what she thought was what her brother had referred to. It wasn't as grand as Theoburkana, but what she saw on the surface was many times larger than the dwarf capital's trading outpost on the surface. Considering this, what lay underground must be truly colossal. The 3 circles were 3 stone walls. The center of the city, along with most of its inner ring, glimmered with light in the darkness. The outer section was dark, as well as a portion of the inner ring which seemed to be nearly bare of buildings. Hegenmal descended, but she remained high above to examine what lay below. Many Quagga-like creatures milled about, but they all seemed to wear some adornment like the Quagga leader or what she imitated on her dwarven self. Like the vast majority of land creatures, they seldom looked up. After she was satisfied that she had seen enough, Ilishnish descended to a portion of the wall where she sensed other dragons. She alighted on a frosted-over area and saw several of her siblings within some sort of stone construction. At the entrance, 2 small figures stood behind a table. She sniffed at their pale bodies. They were female. Their scent was cloaked under a much stronger perfume, but their features seemed like what races like dwarves would consider female. They were also dead. First elder liches, now undead female creatures. The undead females looked up at her with their glowing, crimson eyes. "Where is your number?" one of them asked. "My number?" The plain-sounding reaction to her appearance was unexpected. Usually, when a dragon swooped down, those below would panic and make all sorts of noises. The 2 undead females exchanged glances. Ilishnish sensed that they were roughly as strong as the other dragons in her generation, making them weaker than she was. Even if it came to blows, she could always just flee if things didn't turn out well. "Then what is your name?" the same female asked as the other pulled out a book and opened it over the table. "Why are you demanding my name?" Ilishnish was immediately suspicious. They stared at each other across the table for a long while before a third undead female walked out from within the building, holding a wooden clipboard. "What's going on?" she asked. "It has no number," one replied. "It has no name," said the other. "It has no bag," the newcomer noted and looked down at her clipboard. "All 18 are accounted for." They all looked to Ilishnish and tilted their heads in unison. "She doesn't belong." "An intruder? We should kill her?" "Whoa." Ilishnish hunkered down defensively. "How did that escalate so quickly? What do you mean I don't belong? That's my brood in there." "Brood? Kin? Blood?" The one with the clipboard tapped her cheek for a moment before looking up at her again. "Whose spawn are you?" "S spawn?" Ilishnish felt her tail twitch. "Couldn't you have put it in some better way? If you must know, I am Calistran's daughter." The undead female looked back down to her clipboard again, scanning through the pages attached to it. Without a word, she turned away and walked back into the shelter. Roughly halfway through, she stopped and turned to speak to someone out of sight, and Calistran stretched her neck out to look in Ilishnish's direction. After a brief conversation and a slow nod from Ilishnish's mother, the undead female made her way back towards them. "She claims that she is what she claims." The female produced some instrument and began to write something down. 19, yes? The first asked. "There's no badge for that," said the second. "Use the spare 9, the third said. The second female produced a white hexagonal plaque with an unpolished wooden frame. Ilishnish sensed that it was of little value. Placing it face up on the table, the undead female produced her own writing instrument and squeezed a 1 in front of the 9. The thickness of the character did not match the other, and after several attempts to make the digit more substantial, the undead female held it out to Ilishnish. Ilishnish sniffed at the plaque again. What little value it held had deteriorated even further from being scribbled on. What's this for? Identification. Identification? I already have a name. And now you have a number. Elishnish peered down in irritation at the female, but it looked blithely on. Rather than argue over the useless thing, Elishnish moved on to a more important topic. What about my bag? The three females exchanged glances again before the third spoke. Infinite haversacks, along with all other articles, are not granted until training and orientation are complete. There was more? Heginmal had not said anything beyond the valuable bags. Another detail caught her attention. Wait, what do you mean by training and orientation? Rather than provide any real answer, the third female turned back towards the shelter. Follow me, she said before walking away. Elishnish looked to the first two, who no longer paid her any attention, then followed after the one who she thought would lead her to what she wanted. The shelter built along the wall consisted of a row of alcoves, each appeared to contain a frost dragon. Most lay despondent with their eyes closed or stared dully at nothing in particular. A layer of rime coated the floor, and the lack of possessions over the bare stones left a sad and lonely impression on her as she made her way along. The undead female came to a stop before the alcove that Calistran had poked her head out of. This one requires orientation, the undead female told Elishnish's mother. Report to the front desk once she's familiarized with the new procedures. Without waiting for a response, the undead female returned up the corridor. Elishnish looked to her mother, then to the undead female, then back again. It is good to see you well, daughter, Calistran said in dreary tones. I hardly recognize you, mother. Elishnish flexed her claws over the stone floor. Why are you here? Why are you acting so meek around these vampire brides? Her mother offered. Whatever. They're so much weaker than you, plus you wield divine magic. How can you allow them to address you like that? I know that they are much weaker, but their mistress is so much more stronger. Mistress? Not master? What about this Einzulgan fellow? Elishnish's tail swished over the icy stone floor, and she awaited any useful tidbit about the powerful dragon lord. Einzulgan is the master of their mistress. I suppose Heginmal found you and told you what happened. He said that father was slain easily. Elishnish frowned, though I cannot imagine how. He's always been one to make mountains out of molehills. He wasn't exaggerating, Calistran sighed. Olisar Dark died right in front of me, as far as I am from you right now. The other brood mothers were there to witness it too. Then tell me, how was an ancient dragon slain so easily? Was he laid low by some powerful artifact? It was a spell. A spell? Elishnish scoffed, how can that be? Unless it was the fabled magic of our ancestors, then I suppose it would make sense. The magic of the present, however, cannot do such a thing. That I do not know, Calistran said. My poor, sweet daughter, you were not there, so I imagine that you will need to suffer a bit to understand. Elishnish scowled at her. Seeing her mighty parent so cowed and stuffed in what looked very much like some sort of stall, bereft of any treasure, was both disturbing and repulsive. Everyone else received the same treatment as well, as far as she had witnessed. When I see Heginmal again, Elishnish muttered, I'm going to break his tail. Calistran's head perked up at the mention of his name. You shouldn't give your brother such a hard time, she said. And why is that? Elishnish's voice grated. This is nothing like he suggested. You've all been crammed into these pens. They even call them pens. Elishnish shouted, this is insane. He saved us all. Her mother's tone was unchanged, just so you know. If not for him, many others would have been slain, including me. You should be nicer to your brother. Well, good for you, but that means nothing to me. Maybe I'll add a knot or two for extra measure, wasting my time like this. A familiar chonking sound drew close. Ah, sister, Heginmal said cheerfully, I found this instrument in front of your room. Elishnish turned and beamed at her sibling. Have I ever told you just how much I love you, dear brother? You said I was gross a few days ago, Heginmal said. I did, Elishnish replied. Now give me my instrument. Heginmal placed the magical drum on the floor between them and Elishnish carefully drew it towards herself with a claw. Inhaling the rich aroma of the enchanted instrument, she felt the tension in her mind ease away. It was already stressful enough that she had been deprived of her hoard, the histories, manuals, records and maps within her humble lair stripped away entirely, and losing yet another precious treasure would have surely driven her over the edge or turned her utterly despondent like the other frost dragons of the Enclave. Why was her brother so damnably upbeat anyways? "Mother," Elishnish asked, "has Heginmil gone insane after all that has happened?" "Your brother is not the same anymore, daughter," Kalistran answered. "I'm still me," Heginmil protested. "You make it sound as if I've been transformed into something else entirely." "The you of times past would certainly have not agreed," Kalistran returned. "Everyone who has watched you for the past few days recognizes this." "He still seems like a weakling to me." Elishnish gave her brother a dubious once-over. "That is not surprising," their mother said, "coming from you. You've heeded my wisdom and made your way far ahead of the others, but you'll see just how your brother has really changed soon enough." Kalistran yawned widely, shifting back into her pen. Elishnish's mother showed little energy, not even reacting to the valuable drum that was passed right in front of her. "Heginmil, be a dear and let your sister know what's going on. I don't feel like much of anything anymore these days." Elishnish's scales rippled in disgust as she watched the despondent Kalistran tuck in her head and close her eyes. She could detect no sign of the proud and cunning female that she long considered a role model for herself, the ambitious frost dragon matriarch who had set her children on the paths of power and knowledge. Even now, Elishnish openly agreed that her own strength relative to the others in her generation was in no small part due to her mother's encouragement, and seeing her current state was disquieting, to say the least. She scowled down at the drum from the dwarf treasury. How could an entire population of dragons turn into a pitiful group that resembled nothing more than chattel in such a short period? "If you would like somewhere to put that," Heginmil said, "maybe we should start by finding a place for you to stay." Elishnish turned away from her discomforting observations, narrowing her eyes at her brother. "You want to stick me in one of these pens?" Her icy tone set Heginmil back a few paces. "Actually, there's a mountain range to the south near here. It seems a much better place to stay, better than these accommodations, anyways." "Actually," Heginmil said, "they only made the hoardings large enough for those of us that came initially. I'm not sure what they'll find for you. They probably won't let you just go around as you please. We should check and see what sort of arrangements they can come up with." "They won't let me?" Elishnish furrowed her brow. "I don't see anything that can stop me." She lashed her tail over the frozen stones, and her front claws idly drew long furrows before her. Heginmil gave her a long look. "Sister, it's really not a good idea to display that sort of attitude around here," he said carefully. "Can't you tell from how all the others are behaving?" "I can tell that they're not worthy of being called dragons anymore," she sniffed. "If that's what you're saying. Why that is beyond me. You say that there are some powerful individuals around, but all I see are these pasty undead females wandering about like quagga." "Mother was right," Heginmil sighed. "You're in for quite a bit of suffering if you plan on learning the hard way." "You mean the easy way?" "Well, yes, I suppose that's practically correct." He tapped a pair of talons on the stone lightly. "Elishnish, you said to me earlier that it's a good thing that I finally understood what Father meant by his words to me. Mother is far more cunning than Father ever was, even on his best days, so it would be a good thing to heed her words before something unfortunate befalls you." Elishnish peered at Heginmil suspiciously. They got along well enough as far as broodmates went, but it was the first time that he had expressed anything like concern over her well-being. "This newfound care for my health is quite unsettling, brother," she said. "What are you plotting?" Heginmil let out a nervous laugh, and she tried to ignore his jiggling as he did so. Dragons weren't even supposed to jiggle. She once again wondered just how he got this way. "Ah, was I that obvious?" he asked. "Rather than obvious," she answered. "I've never heard you speak this way to anyone before. Spit it out." "All right," he cleared his throat in an annoyingly drawn-out way. "You've learned how to take on the appearance of dwarves and things like that, yes?" "Go on." "Yes, well, I thought I could ask you to look around in the human city, as a human or something along those lines. This place is a center of trade, like Fierberkana once was, and many things from the world pass through here. With your magic, You can go in amongst them and find books and things that we've never seen before." That sounded a lot more like her brother. If he required her to perform tasks he knew only she was capable of, then his cautionary words to her would at least have some tangible motive behind them. It was something she had planned on doing for herself, anyway, once she decided it was safe enough to do so. If she could get him to owe her a few favors along the way. "Fine," she said, and Hejinmal heaved a sigh of relief. "I will see where this leads me for now. By the way, brother, I hope you don't plan on shutting yourself in again. This flimsy wall is nothing like dwarven architecture, it will collapse eventually if you keep expanding like that." No, they wouldn't let us do anything like that anyways," he replied. "Besides, now that I know, yes? Plus with these bags that we all get, I can carry my books with me and read on the fly." The reminder that there were other things that she could get her claws on mollified her irritation over the whole situation somewhat. The undead female had mentioned that there were other articles as well. If a small amount of her time could net her great gains with little risk, then all the better, since she was going to take her time exploring the city with this apparent shelter near at hand anyways. "One of those undead said that there were other things that came along with those bags," she said. "Do you have them as well?" Yes." Hejinmal's belly scraped over the floor as he turned to head towards the table at the entrance. "Adults like us receive 4 infinite haversacks. We all also receive a periapt of health, ring of regeneration, ring of sustenance and greater ring of fire resistance. In addition, there are several message scrolls provided for communications purposes." Ilishnish's mind worked as he listed off the treasures. They had never entered into her possession before, but they were items seemingly similar to the ones listed occasionally in the ledgers of Feobarkana during the peak of its prosperity, except for the greater ring of fire resistance, but she decided it was just a more powerful version of that sort of accessory. "There must be some catch to all of this," she said as she padded after her brother. "Why is everyone getting these? How do they even have so many? It makes absolutely no sense that anyone would think to make even one of us any stronger." "Because they are so much stronger that it doesn't matter," Hejinmal replied simply. "Everyone is getting these because they believe us so weak that we will eventually perish without them. They are not a tribute, nor are they gifts, just a practical consideration for the times that lie ahead of us." Excuse me?" Hejinmal called out to the vampire bride holding the clipboard, who was walking in the opposite direction. She had several of the same bags that Ilishnish had seen on Hejinmal slung over her shoulders. At his voice, she turned her head to look up at them as they approached. "What can I do for you?" she said. "Do you have a place for my sister to stay?" Hejinmal asked. "I'm still showing her around, but she has something to put away." The vampire bride twirled her pen in her fingers as she looked along the row of pens. The pen stopped, and she looked back up again. "This way, please," she said. She led them back over to the entrance with a desk. At the end of the hoardings, there was a large door, which the vampire bride pushed open. She stepped back and gestured towards the doorway. Ilishnish and Hejinmal stretched their necks to peer inside. The length was about the same as the pens that housed the other dragons, but it was only half the width. Several brushes, mops, brooms and buckets were stored at the back of the room, and a long, hanging shelf with towels and boxes placed upon it ran along one of the walls. "Well, it's a bit narrow," Hejinmal said, "but it has some furnishings. You have a door as well, the others don't have that." Ilishnish's tail twitched. "Brother," she growled in a low voice. "This is a broom closet." "Is it? I've never seen one before." "It definitely is," she told him. "I saw a few in the Feobarkana while wandering around. All of the inns had them. The size might be a problem in 100 years or so, but it looks nice and cozy for now, yes?" Ilishnish's tail whipped out and slapped Hejinmal across his right haunch. Hejinmal let out a loud yelp, and Ilishnish froze in shocked disgust as he rippled from the impact. It took a moment to find her voice again. "I'm not some shut-in like you," she shouted over his whimpering. "How can I stay in a place like this? Look here, you." She turned her head back towards where the vampire bride was, but she had gone off somewhere. Ilishnish looked into the room, then twisted her neck back to look towards the desk before her senses registered someone approaching. A different vampire bride walked past her with something in hand, retrieving a hammer from the shelf in the closet before nailing the plaque with the impromptu 19 to the door. The number ended up slightly lopsided and, after a few failed attempts at straightening it, the vampire bride simply shrugged and put the hammer away. "There you go, number 19, she said. "Oh, we'll be squeezing by you to access the cleaning tools inside, so don't block the way when you're in there." "Where are you going, number 19? "I am not number 19. Elishnish growled as she stormed off. "I'm going somewhere else. You can have your stupid closet." "Your orientation and training are incomplete," the vampire bride called out after her. "Bite me," Elishnish snarled. After several more strides, the vampire bride started shouting behind her. "A dragon is fleeing." The two others at the desk turned and ran towards Elishnish. Several frost dragons poked their heads out from their pens. "Halt!" one vampire bride cried. "Stop!" called the other. The two vampire brides from the desk grabbed her tail and dug their heels into the stone, but the icy surface offered them no purchase. The remaining vampire bride ran after them as well. The frost dragons exchanged glances between themselves as the three vampire brides, fastened to Elishnish's tail, skidded along the top of the wall. "It's Elishnish." "What is she doing?" "She's fighting the vampire brides." "What?" "We're going to be blamed for this. We'll be killed." "Stop her." "I'm not ready to become a purse." The wall shuddered under the force of a half-dozen frost dragons dashing after their defiant sibling. Preparing to take wing, Elishnish was bowled over by three of her half-siblings. "Ugh," she shouted, "why do you all have so much energy all of a sudden? Get off." The tangle of dragons and vampires continued to writhe upon the wall as the remainder looked on. "Sister, Hegemil, I swear if you jump on me I'll..." Elishnish didn't get to finish her threat. The struggle rolled them off of the wall, and they plummeted to the mostly cleared section of the city below. 6 tons of dragons and vampires crashed into the ground, throwing up a large cloud of dust that rose over the battlements. A few of the nearby denizens, a mix of dwarves, lizardmen, quagga, goblins and ogres, started to appear from the surrounding dwellings, looking curiously towards the commotion. The air was filled with the sound of dragons hacking away after inhaling the cloud of dust, and the vampire brides walked out of it first. Elishnish wriggled her way out of the tangled mess of her half-brothers and sisters, finally dragging herself out into the clear air beyond. In front of her stood the 3 vampire brides in a line along a paved street. Behind them was some sort of building complex where many small heads poked out of windows to look in her direction. A tall figure, relative to the vampire brides, stepped out of the gate in the low wall of pale stone that surrounded the buildings. She wore odd-looking garments of black and white, with a similarly styled cap over long, carmine, hair that trailed down her back in 2 large braids. A dark expression emerged from her dark complexion, a predatory smile accompanied by the gleam of amber eyes that reflected the scarce light about them. For the first time in many months, Elishnish felt the chill of fear run up her spine. "Oh ho!" the figure licked her lips and grinned. "Now what do we have here?"